So, welcome everybody. We're excited to walk you through several things today. We've invited Floyd to give us an overview and talk a little bit about, Redwood and some of the great things that are going on, some of the benefits of it. And then we'll also walk you through CastleBridge's R squared Redwood enablement package. So we've had a team of folks working for a couple of months now, just really making this a well-oiled machine so that we can quickly, work with clients and get them enabled in Redwood and get them ready to go. So I know we've got a combination of clients, partners, other things, other folks out there from Oracle. We'll show you how we've structured it, and we've got, I think, 9 or 10 of these either completed or ongoing right now. We'll talk about what's working, what's not working, and why we've structured it this way. We'll then land on Q&A. So a bit of housekeeping on that. Don't wait till the end to put your questions in. If you've got questions, there's a Q&A feature. We've got a team of folks from CastleBridge monitoring the Q&A. Just go ahead and pop your question in there when you're thinking about it. And our team will either queue it up in the live session or answer it directly in the Q&A discussion. Everybody is on mute, so if you need to come off mute or if you want to say something, put it in the chat and one of the moderators will help get you there. We're also recording the session because some people may not be able to make it, and we'll post this out to our YouTube channel and put a link on LinkedIn once we have the recording edited and ready to go. So I guess with that, without further ado, we'll dive right in. Floyd, I'll turn it over to you if you want to do a quick intro, and then I know you've got some stuff to share with the team.
I do. So my name is Floyd Teeter. I am from the Oracle Cloud Development Center of Excellence for HCM, and amongst other things that I do, I'm deep into the rollout of Redwood for HCM. So when Lowry was going to do this today, he asked me to share a few tidbits about getting to Redwood. So let me blow this up. I'm assuming you all can see my screen a little bit, or you can see my screen. Let me know if you can't.
Yes, we can.
Good. So let's talk about the Redwood design system. And I should start it by saying everything here is under safe harbor. I'm not going to roll through the slide because you guys have seen that slide before that says everything I say could change before the end of the session. So be cautious in your reliance on whatever I give you. I'm giving you the best info I have at this time. When you talk about Redwood, you need to think about Redwood in two different buckets. One of them being applications that were natively written for Redwood. I'll call those the new Redwood only capabilities. Journeys, dynamic skills, grow, touch points, opportunity, marketplace, things like that. And a great way to get to dip your toe into the water with Redwood is to go use some of those applications or features that were natively designed for Redwood. Journeys is a great place to get started. There's no fee associated with turning on Journeys. If you have core HR, it's part of your license. You can get in there and jump on it and play with it if you haven't already, and many of you have. Then there's the second bucket, which is reimagined experiences with Redwood. And what we've done here is we're taking the applications and the pages that were originally built in responsive UX and classic UI, and we're moving them over to Redwood. Almost everything in ESS and MSS, HR help desk, performance reviews, those are the reimagined experiences. Now, one of the things we need to talk about as a customer moving to Redwood, we need to talk about Oracle's approach to MVP, which means minimum viable product. So when we first announced back in December, Redwood for HCM and now is the time, the intent was that we delivered a minimum viable product in 23D. And a very stark release with minimum functionality and features, with the idea that we would get rapid input from our customers about what needed to be done in terms of adding features, any bugs they ran into, use cases that needed to be supported. And the reason we do that is to get more of this new functionality out to our customers as quickly as we can. We could try and hold back, spend the next 2 or 3 years building a near perfect product, polishing the apple, if you will, and putting it out, and we'd still miss a whole lot of use cases from a whole lot of customers. We just cannot envision everything everyone's doing with a product down to the finest levels of detail. So rather than do that, we put out a minimum viable product and we rely on customer feedback to build the product out. So we're delivering refinement in layers through the quarterly updates, quarterly patch bundles, cumulative weekly patch bundles. So in essence, we make our customers our partners because you're providing feedback as we go. But what that means as a customer is you need to decide where to jump in. Because in the MVP cycle, we may start out delivering a Razor scooter. If you follow the graphic analogy here, it may be a Razor, and you might be really unhappy with all that's missing with that Razor. And then we move on to a bicycle and then a scooter and on up to that lovable product at the end. That's a sedan. So you have to decide where to jump in. And the reason I say that is because there are some customers that want to be right on the front end of this MVP. They'll burn the resources. They'll expend the effort that needs to be expended to stand this thing up in a non-production instance and kick the tires, test it, give us the feedback through SRs, through ideas in the Ideal Lab, through discussions on Customer Connect. And then there will be others that are what I call fast followers rather than early adopters. They're not quite ready to expend the energy when we release the Razor to help us build it up to a scooter because they may not have the resources, they may not have the time, they may not have the bandwidth, they may be focused on other projects, and we get that. But some folks can jump in with that later in the game, somewhat later in the game, and do some additional testing, and their stuff will likely get baked into the product as well. And then there are the folks that really want to wait to the end; they just want it to work, and that's okay. You can wait to the end, but the difference is by that time we may have made design decisions about the product based on the early feedback we got that may not be to the preference of those who wait until the end of the game. So there are pros and cons about where to jump in and how to jump in and what to do that come at you as a customer in MVP. You need to be aware of that. And I'm sure you all have seen this chart. It's quite the eye chart. This is adoption planning at a glance. We put this out, golly, back in December, and it still relatively holds true. The one thing I'll point out here is down in where it talks about release 25B, all of ESS and MSS and Redwood. What that means is 25B is the target for adoption of Redwood for employee and manager self-service. Employee and manager self-service only, nothing else. If you're looking at administrative pages, the professional pages, the things that come up under my client groups, think 25D as in dog. That's the target. So your first focus should be on ESS and MSS, and I'll give you some accelerated adoption points so you know about the little nuances that play out in addition to that. Newly provisioned pods delivered with Redwood enabled. That's 24A. We started doing that. So if you have a brand new pod, I'm not talking about refreshing an existing environment, but a brand new environment that you order from us, it will be delivered with Redwood enabled. If you are a Redwood, pardon me, if you are an Oracle Learning Cloud customer, you need to adopt Redwood Learning Self-Service for learners and managers before or during 24B. 24B is that's the current release, is the last train out of the station. When you get to 24C, we will de-support the responsive and classic UI learning self-service experiences, and we will support the Redwood learning self-service experience. We're already starting to deliver select pages with Redwood enabled automatically. My Spotlight's a good example. In 24B, it comes enabled. Person types came enabled. They're already there. Checklist and onboarding will be replaced by journeys in 24D. Remember earlier on when I talked about a great way to get your feet wet with Redwood was journeys? Well, in 24D, you really need to get your feet wet if you're using checklists and onboarding, because it will be replaced by journeys. The Oracle time and labor transition from the classic UI time card. That happens before or during 24D, 24D being your last train out of the station. When you take the 25A update, we will no longer support the classic UI time card. The next bullet, I've already talked about that, ESS and MSS and 25B. And 25B will be delivered with those pages enabled by default. And then adopting all the remaining HCM pages by 25D. So I've just given you a bundle of deadlines. Now, I'm not going to go through all the detail on these slides, but you need to know that there are prerequisites to enabling Redwood, inventorying your personalizations, figuring out how to migrate them, adding privileges to custom roles to make sure you've got the Redwood required privileges in your custom roles. You need to enable Oracle Search, and that's all before you get started. And then this is how you actually go through it. You enable the administrator profile values. We have a tool out there to help you do automated migrations when they're supported. Then you'll need to do manual migrations, and then you need to do your branding for your culture. The branding tools that we used to use in responsive, the appearance tool comes immediately to mind. The things we used to brand for corporate culture and environment, the colors, the fonts, that sort of thing. Those are all very limited in Redwood right now, and the new approach probably won't be out any sooner than the end of this calendar year. So there's a branding issue there as well that needs to be dealt with. And then there's some additional nuances, and again, I'll go back to learning as a great example. You've got to have activity sequencing enabled to adopt Redwood self-service for learners and managers. You need to be aware that enabling a single administrator profile value may enable multiple related Redwood pages. A good example is the one I've listed here for performance and goals Redwood enabled. It enables 11 pages and flows. So there are lots of little nuances like that. And my point is, coming back to that discussion about MVP, some customers, particularly larger ones that have the teams and the budget to help test our products will jump on at the razor stage. No, for the most part, they'll be pretty self-enabled. But there's a lot to manage, and we recognize that some folks need help with the planning. We've because we're using that MVP approach, everyone's plan is going to be different. Some of us will have lots of resources to test up front. Some of us will have some resources, but limited. They may want to jump in the middle as fast followers. And some will say, I don't want to test Oracle stuff any more than I have to. That's not that detracts from what I'm trying to do as an enterprise. And they'll wait to the very end. There are a lot of decisions to be made. Which increments of Redwood do I adopt first? Because you're not going to adopt it in a big bang. So this is where partners come in terms of being able to help you plan. How do I get to Redwood? Where in the MVP cycle should I jump in? And I'll be very honest, we're doing this today with CastleBridge. I've had a lot of partners ask me to team with them to talk to customers and potential customers about Redwood. And frankly, this is the first time I've accepted the invitation to do it because I only want to do it for partners that I've seen demonstrate some capability in terms of implementing and managing HCM and showing some skill and depth of knowledge when it comes to making the transition to Redwood. And that's why I'm here talking with CastleBridge. And Lowry, frankly, I couldn't give you a better segue. So now I'm just going to shut up and let you take over and talk about your package.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Floyd. Thank you for the kind words, and thank you for going over, the Redwood and a lot of good points there. So, starting late last year, as CastleBridge started to get wind of this move and started to see the pieces fall into place, we decided very early to invest heavily in being the experts in this area. Have had a team of people since December of last year trying to figure out every nuance to this migration. We just knew every client is going to have to make this move. Why don't we invest the time and make it as easy as possible for them to do it? So the direction to the CastleBridge team was this needs to be an assembly line. Like we need to have it down to here's step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's how you do step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here are the outputs and things that we need to know to do that as well. So what we're going to walk you through today is our approach. And I know we've got a combination of our current clients. We've got potential clients. We have other SIs on the call. But I think all of this, it has proven to work because we've done this over 9, 10 clients at this point, and a lot more are coming. So for other partners out on the call, if you don't have a package, if you haven't invested in kind of making this a well-oiled machine for your company, now's the time to do it, because there's a lot of your clients that are going to need guidance along the way and make it easier on them too. So let's just jump right in. As Floyd mentioned, there's a roadmap. Like we know the deadline for when things need to be, the employee and manager self-service need to be migrated to Redwood. We know, we're on 25B, 25C at this point, and we know we're in that motorcycle / bicycle phase of that MVP. So the way we've structured our package is what we call steps. And step 1 really is let's tackle the prerequisites. Let's tackle the planning. Let's tackle getting things enabled that we know are stable, we know we're ready to go now. And let's set a plan for how are we going to roll out Redwood? How are we going to handle change management? How are we going to test this and plan it. So in step one of our package, we're doing several things. We're analyzing the security. As Floyd mentioned, there are certain security changes that are needed if you're using custom roles. We need to make sure those duties and privileges for employees or managers or administrators are there so that Redwood UI functions properly. What CastleBridge has done as a company is we've gone through and we've mapped out applications, we've mapped out roles in buckets, meaning these are employee roles, these are manager roles, these are administrator roles, which allows us to quickly go into clients and say, okay, let me take a dump of all of your custom roles. And I can easily map that to, for this role, you need to add these privileges to it, which makes that piece very efficient to update those security components. Enabling Oracle search. We know Oracle search is a prerequisite. There are a lot of indexes and processes and other things that need to be running for these Redwood pages to work. Let's go ahead and get that off the list. We're seeing about 50% or so of our clients have Oracle search already enabled. If you've got Oracle search already enabled, great. You don't need to worry about that piece. We will still check the indexes to make sure they're scheduled per Oracle's recommendations. If you don't, let's go ahead and get that turned on. Let's go ahead and get you moved to that so that that's one less thing to worry about as we're starting to enable Redwood UI. Inventory personalizations. So we're leveraging the tool that Oracle's provided. We're looking at all of your transaction design studio rules, all of your page composer. We're starting to look at autocomplete, what do clients have in that area. And we're really providing an inventory of here's the magnitude of changes for each client. We're also providing a list of here are things that can be programmatically migrated with the tool and other things that will need manual intervention. Maybe there's not the exact same functionality in the new page, or maybe the tool doesn't migrate that specific personalization yet. We're giving clients an output that really says, here's what you have, and here's what the manual effort will be. We also know that personalization migration tool is being enhanced and updated with each release and with the new pages coming out. So as you start to actually move it, we'll reevaluate that as well. Another thing that we're doing is we're looking in this first step, let's dip our toe in the water. Let's look at the view-only pages. Let's look at something that we can start adding value with Redwood UI that we can enable now that is low effort to do. It's there's not a ton of testing that needs to go along with it because you can't change data, you can't submit a transaction, and we're leveraging this to get the end users used to it. We're leveraging this to get, HRIS or the business teams at clients enabled and understanding how to move those personalizations, how to create the projects, the tool sets that go along with Redwood UI, like VB, so that they're seeing some true in-system benefit from completing this first step. And then the biggest piece of this is we're creating a deployment plan. And that deployment plan takes a lot of things into consideration. We'll talk a little bit more about some patterns that we're seeing with that deployment plan here in a moment. But we're looking at what cohort or release cycle are you with Oracle? What applications do you have live, and when do we project those pages that you need will be available? What blackouts do you have toward the end of this year, early next year? When are your focal cycles? And a lot of other things that we're taking into account in that plan. And then we're presenting back a board-ready presentation that says, here are your options. Here are the pros and cons to the different approaches you could have with rolling this out. And then allowing our clients to, choose one of those options for that step two, that full rollout of Redwood UI. From here, you really have step 2, step 3, how many ever additional steps that are needed. And this is the actual, we're going to take every page, we're going to turn on the Redwood page, turn off the responsive or classic page. We're going to migrate all of the personalizations, update all of the security, go through and make sure everything's tested end to end for those transactional pages and roll them out. So this is the final full deployment. And we've seen this can come as, a step 2, or it might be step 2 and step 3. The point here is we're not going in now and saying, let's enable Redwood end to end and just get it done now. This is a journey. And as Floyd alluded to with that MVP approach, we need to have a plan. We know we have to get this done in a finite amount of time, but we also need to put a lot of thought into that plan, into what's going to work best for you as a client. So, considerations, I think I mentioned these a moment ago. Which cohort are you on? We know the deadline, so let's back in from the deadline and kind of plan how to deploy it. Let's look at all of your business cycles. Some clients are saying, you know what, it would really be great to have Redwood for our performance cycle or our comp cycle this year, and we can take that into account. There's nothing stopping you from saying, you know what, I'm going to turn on the Redwood pages for talent management, and you can plan it for certain things that you might want to deploy sooner, and deploy other things later. So let's take a look at all of those things. Let's also look at resource availability. So, if you wait until the last possible moment, we're going to be hitting year end. We're going to be hitting the beginning of the year when a lot of comp planning and others, peak hiring and other things take place in that early part of the year. So let's look at resource availability and make sure as we're planning this out, we're going to have the resources when we need them. And if not, let's plan around it now when we've got a bit of time to do it. The other thing that's kind of driving for our clients, and as we're presenting these deployment plans and refining them for clients, a couple of other things that are kind of steering that are how long their IT process is to get changes from a lower environment tested and deployed in production. So some clients have a very quick, okay, this is just a validation of a view only page, or this is a validation of these pages. How much testing you need to do on that varies from client to client. And you want to make sure, if you've got to do it in one pod, migrate it to another, test it and deploy it in production, that you're leaving yourself enough time for that process. We've had some clients say, you know what, we're going to trickle these in over time rather than doing a project and tackling these in steps, because they want to decrease the amount of change all at once, but also because they need bite-sized pieces so that they can get it tested and they can get it through that IT life cycle and deployed. The other thing to consider here is really that mixed UI experience. So if you're trickling it in and you're turning some things on, you're leaving other things on the responsive, you will have that experience of some pages have that fresh, new Redwood experience, but then you might click a button on that Redwood page and it might take you back to a responsive page. So you just want to balance that and understand, is it better to pace that change? And is it okay to have that mixed experience? Or is it something where, no, we need the experience unified, and then maybe you wait a little bit later to get that single unified experience. So it really is preference driven there, but a consideration. So the next few things I'm going to walk you through, I mentioned earlier, we've seen some patterns with where we're ending up on the recommendation for these deployment plans. So I'm going to give you 2-3 options that we're seeing out there. And this is actually, kind of the timeline for let's call it an example client. So really we're saying with this option, we've got the client releases listed. We're saying here are some of their peak cycles for open enrollment, talent, comp, year-end blackout. With option one, we're really waiting until in non-production, we're getting that 25A release, and then we're tackling migrating to Redwood for those transactional pages. Keep in mind, this assumes that we've already moved the view-only pages, we've already done the groundwork, the other thing that we're positioning here is really, let's get that done and let's try to keep these migration packages and these step 2, step 3, keep them within a single release rather than letting them bleed over from release to release to release. Because you have to go back and look at the tool and look at other things if you let it go over a single release. Another option, we've had clients that really want to get things enabled ahead of their talent cycle, their comp cycle, their open enrollment. So they're planning on really starting a project to do this ASAP. Early August, 24C hits, they start migrating not just view only pages, but start migrating everything that's available at that point. We'll talk a bit about pros and cons here in a minute, but as you can imagine, there'll be things that aren't available in 24D that you'll have to circle back around to with this approach to really tick and tie and make sure everything in that employee and manager space has been migrated to Redwood. And then the third pattern we're seeing is very common. Let's tackle what we can now in the current release so that we can leverage Redwood for our talent, our comp, our peak cycles for the year. And then let's have another step in 25A that really tackles anything that wasn't released or anything that we weren't able to migrate in mid 2024. We'll tackle that in early 2025. So again, this is not one size fits all. There's no perfect approach for everyone. We're just showing you, in having done 9 or 10 of these now for clients, we're really starting to see some patterns emerge in how the best ways for clients to tackle it. So that's why we're sharing this with you. Okay. So again, some 3 steps here, some pros and cons to the different approaches. 1 step just ahead of the deadline, we've identified that as it's the lowest cost. It's the lowest cost because it's a single step. It's a single testing event. It's a single, turning everything on, unit testing everything, and then client UAT testing it and deploying it. It's riskier though because you're waiting until right before the deadline, and if you have any challenges or you realize that you need more change management, you've got less time to tackle those things if you wait until just ahead of the deadline to tackle this project. There is, on the other hand, less risk because you're taking the functionality after a lot of other clients have taken it. They've logged SRs, they've worked with Oracle on their use cases, and we would expect, over time that those are more refined and you'll have less challenges with them if you start later. This, depending on when your talent comp year end is, this could hit during those cycles, which are typically peaks. And we definitely want to look at that and plan for it. In the last pro and con on that 1 step just ahead of deadline is it's a longer time to see the value. A lot of our clients, once we've shown them the Redwood UI, they want it. It's much more visually appealing, and the feedback we're getting from employee populations is that it's much easier to use. So another consideration here is, you wait until just before the end, and it's a longer time before you see that value in the system from the Oracle investment in the new UI. The next timeline that I showed you is one step before open enrollment, or one step ahead of your peak cycles for the year. It's lower cost than two steps. It allows you to leverage Redwood UI for some of those peak cycles this year. So you get that that value of the new UI in those cycles. The challenge with this one is some features and pages may not be available if we're going live with this in September or October. You're going to have to circle back around in 25A and even beyond 25A with the administrative pages and other things to make sure we've circled back around and we've migrated everything to Redwood UI. And then finally, the two-step approach, that is the combination of these two together. This allows us, I mean, it's a bit higher cost because you've got two testing events and two unit tests and two deployments. So you're really treating it as two projects or two steps, but it gives you the best of both worlds. So it gives you the ability to leverage what's available now, the ability to really start leveraging that new user experience, allow your HRIS team, allow your business teams to gain as much knowledge as soon as possible on the new user experience and not wait until the last minute. It also accounts for circling back around in 25A as those final employee manager pages become available to tick and tie and make sure we have everything migrated and that we're still supported across the board on it. So again, I'll mention it, there are a million different ways you could slice this. These are just the common patterns that we're seeing in these deployment plans. So prerequisites, some things that we learned fairly early. Some of these are in process of changing, but we will point them out. So for most clients currently, VB is provisioned in a single pod, and that's typically the test pod. So as you're looking at this and planning this and preparing to ramp up for a project, you want to look and see if you're new on the new architecture and that you have this in multiple pods, or if the test pod is the pod that you have VB enabled in. Oracle allows a one-time migration to another non-production pod via login SR to do it. But as you're planning the project, this has slowed down several of our projects in the very early ones we did because the test pod isn't where the client wanted to do it. So, planning for this up front, having those discussions, making sure that we know where it is and we know what else is going on in that pod. We know that it's going to be fairly stable for the duration of at least that step one is important to keeping that rolling. With the new architecture, we're starting to get feedback from clients that they're seeing that available in multiple pods now. But you'll definitely want to check your specific use case to see if you've moved to that architecture, when you're moving to that architecture, to have it available in multiple. The last thing on this is some of the updates that you need to make. You need to log in as an actual employee or an actual manager to make those changes, to see those and to make those changes to the pages, to test them, to change them, everything. And if the person making these changes for you is a contractor and you set them up as a contractor, they may not be able to do what they need to do. So just make sure in the lower environment, A, look at your single sign-on. Do you have the dual screen where you can log in directly or go through single sign-on? And B, you're going to need access not just to a contractor record, but also you'll need to be able to log in as an actual employee manager to make the changes and do the unit testing. So a few tidbits there. The last thing I will talk about here before we get to our Q&A session, there's a fairly high demand right now for VB training. And I know Oracle offers some VB training. CastleBridge has put together a very cost-effective, fixed price training session on VB. And this is VB Express. So this is your, the folks that were doing your transaction design studio work and the folks that were doing page composer work. It's those resources that this is targeted to. This is not full VB where we're coding and creating new pages and creating new applications. This is, how do I hide something? How do I turn something on? How do I make it read only? How do I make it required? Those things. And this is a very cost-effective way to enable your teams. So if you've got any questions about any of the stuff we've done, presented today in this package, or specifically the training as well, let us know. Shoot us an email at sales@castlebridgeconsulting.com, and we can get back to you and provide you more detail on it. So with that, I am going to open up the Q&A. Jane, do we have any questions in the chat we should lead off with?
Nothing for the team to cover here, but just one thing to note is that Floyd did clarify in the chat that in 25C and 25D, Oracle is going to be wiring VBCS for all the non-production pods. So we do have a timeline for when that's happening.
Thank you, Floyd. I knew it was coming soon, but I didn't want to commit to a date, so I appreciate it.
Fair enough. I'll put my neck on that chopping block.
All right. And two questions just came in from Anton in the chat. Have we found customers are using the move to Redwood as the opportunity to drop some personalizations that may have been made years ago and are no longer necessary? Or is it mostly lift and shift? Is the first one.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Floyd.
I was going to say, we've seen lots of customers retiring a lot of personalizations in the move to Redwood, because some of them have been baked into the product, and some of them are simply unnecessary given the way Redwood flows. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of that. Is it a lift and shift? No, I would not say that. I would say you got to put some brain power into it to get the best value out of your transition to Redwood.
Absolutely. And that's why we've structured this with step one, having that personalization inventory. Mm-hmm. Let's look at what personalizations you have today. Let's talk about them. Let's understand why they're needed, if they're needed in that new context as well. So that's why we're not moving over a like for like there. And it's a great time to reevaluate with what you've got, reevaluate if it's needed in that new context as well. Thanks, Anton, for the question.
There's another one also from Anton, which is, has CastleBridge created any unique visual builder solutions?
Absolutely. So we've run the gamut on these solutions. We have done a lot of these migrations, just migrating the UI. We have other clients where we've built fully custom applications that use PASS and use VBCS for whole applications that sit on the Oracle stack, integrate with the Oracle Cloud, but have their own pages, have their own integrations. We've also worked with clients that leverage seeded Oracle products, but needed a new way to interact with it for mass data entry and other things, that we've built new UIs that don't replace the Oracle UI, but complement it and allow for that mass data entry. So we've done a lot with the VB Express as well as the full VB, and being able to build solutions that work for client-specific needs.
Anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A. That's all we have so far.
One of the things I want to point out while we're waiting for more questions, Lowry, your training slide on VBCS, there's a really important point that shows up on those slides that is really good. And that is that last bullet on the right-hand side of the box. It's a consultant lead, not a trainer lead, who's delivering the VBCS training. You've got the people who were conducting the classes are the people who have actually built the solutions in VBCS. So one of the upsides here is that you can bring your specific use cases to the VBCS Express training and have somebody who has been there and done that address your use cases. That's pretty high value.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you pointed that out. These are the folks that are out here doing these projects are also leading the training. It's a combination of, several hour training session, virtual instructor-led training with one of our consultant experts, but it's also homework and takeaway. And we're asking you to go do things in your environment and then multiple sync ups after that where you're going and trying it and coming up with your challenges or questions, and then we're jumping back on the phone with you to show you and answer the questions. So we realized that you can only consume so much until you've tried it. So we've structured this training in a way where we're going to give you the foundation, but we're also going to be there to support you as you do it as well.
We have another question, maybe tricky to answer. How many resources are needed to migrate to Redwood pages from the current setup?
It depends on your stack and how many applications, how many, personalizations and other things that you've done. I'll probably say too much here. Our step one of this process is standardized. It's a 5-week fixed price migration. And typically we're assigning half an FTE to it. So that's for step one. Step two is really scalable. Step two is we've got some clients that are getting the information from step one and they're leading step two and using us for advisory. We've got other clients that are saying, no, we want CastleBridge to lead it and we'll be there to learn it and test it and all of that stuff. It really depends on how much you've done in the environment, what applications you're live on, and what needs to be migrated.
It looks like there's a question for you, Floyd. Where do you find most customers are falling down and running into issues when migrating to Redwood? Is it security or getting the timing right, moving the personalizations, et cetera?
Boy, I actually have a template that I go through, a checklist that reminds me when I face a customer issue of the steps to go through. That'll cover about 80% of the issues I run into. And that is number one, have you enabled Oracle Search? And if you've enabled Oracle Search, have you recently re-ingested the indices? Because that's something nobody talks about is enabling Oracle Search isn't a one-off. There's some maintenance required for re-ingesting your indexes. In fact, in learning in particular, there's a whole series of indexes that you should be re-ingesting on a regular basis. So that's one spot. The second is with missing privileges for custom roles in the security model. And then number three is not understanding where we are in the MVP development cycle. Looking for things that, frankly, we haven't delivered yet. Some good examples, some pages hiding or exposing descriptive flex fields. VCBS can do that now, but after a VCBS delivers that functionality, then we have to have the product teams bake that functionality into their individual pages. So it's a two-step dance to get that functionality delivered. And I see a lot of folks getting wrapped around the axle about that. So that's kind of where I see people stumbling.
I agree. As we've gone in and looked at this, those are some of the commonalities we're seeing as well.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
We don't have anything else in the chat, but if anyone else wants to ask anything, please feel free. Or if you'd like to raise a hand, I can unmute you.
Yeah, come on, guys. Don't be shy.
Yeah, meant to be discussion. All right, I don't see any hands or any questions.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank you all for attending, and hopefully you got some insight. Regardless of where you are on your Redwood UI journey, we really appreciate you jumping on. And Floyd, thank you so much for agreeing to jump on and put a lot of context around this as well. If anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We will be posting this video out for anybody who wasn't able to join. So if you have colleagues or others that you think would benefit from the session, grab the link and send it to them. And then if you've got any questions for CastleBridge, don't hesitate to reach out to sales@castlebridgeconsulting.com, and we'll get back to you ASAP. So thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.